I would want you to keep whatever curiosity you have in abeyance for now, and allow me to first deal with what I think are the issues that may have prompted this coming together. We have seen, and those of you who may have been there would perhaps confirm before independence that there was a struggle waged against the oppressive South African regime by people who remained inside the country, and others who went into exile went to also continue that fight against apartheid colonialism. Now, of course, we all could not leave and go into exile, but it doesn't mean that those who remained inside were, for one or the other reason, cowards or had abdicated their duty as citizens to rise and fight against the apartheid authority that was here. But you see, we made a mistake with the advent of independence in 1990, and I think this is the start of all the problems, in my view. With the advent of independence in 1990, everybody who stayed behind and remained in a country, for some reason, believed that those comrades who came from outside, from exile, were better poised to rule the country, and therefore we surrendered the country, its resources, and everything else that pertains to it. We surrendered this to our comrades from exile. And we, of course, genuinely believed at that time that we all had the same interests, and that our comrades from exile would take this country to where we had all wanted it to be, and that they would bring prosperity, and that there would be employment, there would be industry. But as you must have come to learn, the comrades from exile did two things. Number one, they quickly learned that they had their hands on very important resources of the country, and in order to continue to have their hands on those resources, they had also devised, or they had to devise, a strategy of making sure that they kept as many as possible people who remained inside the country far away from these resources as they could. And they did that. And the idea was not to preserve a given tribe, as some of us may want to believe. The idea was to preserve a given club of individuals using the resources that belong to all of us. And in that order, they then appointed each other, and you can tell, I mean, look at the parastatals that were created subsequent to independence, look at positions, whether ministerial or otherwise, that these are not just people from, mainly from one tribe, these are people from exile. That's the idea. I don't think tribe had anything to do with it. I think it was about, and I think that's why in the end we started talking about the Tanga group and so on and so forth. It's because the colleagues from exile had made sure that they isolated the rest of us, and they kept on taking advantage of our resources. Now, they did that, as I said, for reasons of self-preservation, and that mainly was the driving rationale behind what they did. Now, of course, you must also understand that if you had come in from outside with a group of people your friends and so on, you would naturally develop some allegiance towards them, and whatever you do in the dark would then be best kept in the dark by those very same people. You would not want to open yourself up too much to people that you may not have spent time with. So when some of our own comrades, for instance, argue that a lot of the development that has gone on in this country has benefited your Shwamo-speaking Namibians, you need to think again and realize that the majority of your Shwamo-speaking Namibians just languish in poverty like the rest of us. There's no other issue, I think, to that. Now, apart from having taken almost control of almost every resource that the country has, what our leaders also did, and here I'm not talking specifically about the current government, I'm talking about the government as we started in 1990. We, for some unexplained reason, opened the country up, gave it to people called Chinese. We, for some unexplained reason, because we don't know how the Chinese started coming here and why. But what we do know is that a lot of the Chinese that started coming in had also, over time, became naturalized. They have become citizens of the country. And as if it's a joke, this is what has been happening. Now, over and above that, we have also allowed companies from, for instance, our neighboring South Africa here, to put up shop in a country. The examples are legion, whether it's ShopRite, whether it's Edgar's, whatever it is, the examples are many. All of these drove the economy of the country slowly but surely over an extended period of time. I mean, it's been 29 years now, into recession, a situation which had allowed the majority of Namibian business people to close shop because they could not compete against these foreign companies. You would, just in the last 12, if not a bit more months, if the statistics that were given by the Employment Equity Commission are anything to go by, we've lost about 37,000 jobs just in the last 12 or so months. And the companies that have shut down are companies that would ordinarily be Namibian companies, whether in the construction or in the retail sector. And as a result, our people have lost business and they have lost jobs. In recent time, we have also seen how our Chinese brothers have started to strategically position themselves, whether through the purchase of Rosing Uranium or the establishment of the Chita Cement or the purchase of Orongo Cement, or the financing of our strategic assets such as the international airport and so on and so forth, or the port at Wolfish Bay. So all of these are done not so much because people have, for some reason, this belief that they are promoting what is in the best interest of our country, but this is all done to preserve the same group of people that took over the country since independence. And this brings me to the issue, for instance, of how the country's fishing or fisheries resources have been abused. Where if you carefully trace back the manner in which fishing quotas were allocated and the individuals who have always benefited from the fishing quotas, you would realize that it's the same group of individuals. And that has been the trend since then up until now. And as it is today, you would also recall that we were supposed already to have known, or to have been informed as to who the beneficiaries of the fishing quotas would be, and that decision has been shelved, most probably because a lot of our politicians now realize that they may not have a chance to come back in the next round, and this is their last chance at making sure that they line their pockets. Now, we have started since 1990. We are here today, and we have had decades of entrenched, decades of institutionalized corruption, which in my view has been the cause of what we have today as the economic crisis that has, to some extent, forced government to want to have people contribute 2% of their basic salaries to help ameliorate the economic situation or crisis in which we find ourselves. Now, you would also, colleagues, if at all we are all as concerned as citizens as we should be, you would notice that for the past 29 years, if one is to take a few examples of the parastatals that we have, you can take, for instance, NamPower, and I've seen in recent newspaper reports that NamPower has boasted to have made about, was it 1.3 or 1.4 billion dollars in revenues. Now, that's NamPower, that's 29 years or so. And apart from the revenues that it says it has made, what is it that they have done to add to the country's capacity to generate or to promote self-reliance in as far as the generation of electricity is concerned? And you can go back and look at what has happened over the past years. What we have done is sustained what Apartheid South Africa gave us. We have not added value to the capacity of our own power generation. We know that the country, as we are told by NamPower, consumes about 666 megawatts, but 70% of that comes from across the border. So what does it tell you? What if we pay the officials of NamPower these hefty salaries, we pay them saying thanks to them for what? What exactly is that we are saying thank you for? Is it to have us trapped in the situation in which we are? You have the situation at AMTA that was so much reported, where executive salaries have just ballooned, and it's as if these institutions have no recourse in law to rein in their executives. And that has left us wonder as to who really is in charge of our country's resources. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I feel that the fact that we have seen an increase in unemployment over the years that has never gone down is one reason why, for instance, government has decided to militarize our social space. Because there's a strong feeling, I suspect, that soon we will get to feel the economic pressure, and soon citizens will be forced to rise against what they experience every day, the economic hardships that they experience every day, and the military is sent out as a way of trying to tell our people that if you behave in any way that is unacceptable to the state, there shall be no questions asked, you will be shot dead. And therefore, you should either confine yourself to being in fear or simply just remain in silence. Otherwise, you will be dealt with and you might be permanently silenced by the state, and in this case, directly using, of course, the military. Now, we have, apart from the incident that took place recently, we have had others. The young lady who was killed, who was a member of the children of the liberation struggle. Today we don't really have answers as to what happened to this Namibian. And it is becoming a trend, and I think as citizens, we should not remain silent, because our silence has led to what we have experienced a few days ago when our military guy shot and killed an innocent Namibian. There are a few other issues, colleagues, that also have prompted us to get together here. And it is the way in which we feel government has not properly addressed and resolved the question of land. Whether this is agricultural land or whether this is land in urban settlement or in urban areas. We, for instance, feel strongly that while some quarters of our nation are talking about reparation in ancestral land, government went out to sell, or at least approve the sale of farmland to foreigners. And it is not the first time that this has happened. You would recall that before the land conference of last year, Minister Utoni Mioma had also authorized the sale of free farms to some Russian oligarch. And it has now, I think in my view, reached a point where citizens would no longer just need to keep quiet and in the comfort of their bedrooms and sitting rooms complain about what government is doing, but it is time to rise and take government to task in dealing with its insensitivity and irresponsibility in the manner in which it has been handling land reform and distribution. Now, we feel that if any responsible government was committed to the well-being of its citizens, it would have known them in its decisions to dispose of some of these key assets and not just send out a team of people to go and talk about ancestral land when there is nothing anymore to give, should the need arise for people to be given some form of compensation.